he just went low. He's in his head. He's in his head. He's open. His head wide open. Cracked open in the face.
Hey, what's going on, guys? It's my mentor, that's 100, back again with another episode of How's My Team. Literally finished recording the last episode yesterday and recording this today on Wednesday morning. So we got a few things to talk about. Obviously, we've got Liverpool in the Champions League. We've also got the Merseyside Derby. Obviously, this weekend, we've got the Titans against the Warriors. We've got the Giants against the Swans in the Sydney Derby. We've got the Wanderers over in New Zealand playing Wellington. We've got a whole lot of stuff to talk about. So let's get started with the episode. Alright, so first things first, we'll talk about Liverpool in the Champions League. You'll probably notice in this episode my hair will change between, obviously, segments. I am planning to get a haircut today, Wednesday morning. I'm recording this, so if you wonder why my hair changes in the middle of the video, I apologise for that, but I've needed a haircut for quite a number of weeks, and I'm getting one today. So this segment will be having my hair, obviously, as it is the wild hairstyle that I've got with so many curls in it, but obviously when we record the rest of this episode, it'll be different from that. But obviously, starting off with that. But we go to Liverpool, obviously playing at home in the second leg of the quarterfinals in terms of the Champions League, obviously against PSG. PSG going in with a 2-0 aggregate score on the two legs. And it was also another 2-0 loss to PSG for Liverpool. So in actuality, they did really well, relatively well, because it was 0 at half time. So it was 0 at half time. There was the card for McAllister and stoppage time in the first half. So if we did go through, obviously at that point in time, he would have been suspended for a game, obviously against the opponent. We'll talk about it in a second. Was a VAR check for a no penalty. I'm assuming that might be in defence, but I didn't watch the game. Obviously it was 5 a.m. my time, so I was in bed. They scored in the 72nd minute. Dembele scored. I believe that might be how it's pronounced, but I'm not 100% sure. And then they scored in the first minute of stoppage time towards the end of the game. He scored a double to make it 4-0 PSG. And ultimately, of course, it was always going to be a tough game. Hugo Edeke also went down as well, injured in the first half. So we won't have him for any of the games. That apparently it might be an Achilles, which not ideal. But yeah, so we're eliminated in the quarterfinals in the Champions League this year. But in saying that, obviously we've moved one step closer to the trophy this year than we did last year. Obviously, even with the side that we had, but obviously going down to the same opponent in back-to-back years. But again, PSG, fantastic side. Like, take nothing away from them. They are a fantastic side. They know what to do to win very, very tough games. And honestly, they do. They deserve it. And they deserved to be champions last year. They played relatively well last year. and they're playing almost just as good, if not better, this year. But possession game was 52.6% to Liverpool to 47.4% for PSG. So a little bit more balanced in this game, despite obviously not getting the goals, compared to obviously last game where it was an absolute domination in terms of possession. Ultimately, 6 shots to 5 on target for PSG in PSG's favour. So much closer to the woodwork this game for Liverpool than it was last game, but 9 shots to 2 off target in favour of Liverpool. So quite a lot of shots that are going awry. Passing accuracy was about the same, 77.8% to 77% in Liverpool's favour, so relatively close. Defence was pretty good. In terms of discipline, obviously it was 2 yellow cards to Liverpool. But apart from that, yeah, we get bundled out in the quarters again to PSG, and they're looking like they're going to try and defend their crown relatively well. They will go up, I believe, against Atletico Madrid. They won 2-1 this morning against Barcelona. Actually, Barcelona won 2-1 in the game at Atletico at Madrid, but obviously it'll be 3-2 in terms of aggregate score. So that extra goal in terms of it for Atletico actually did help them get through. So ultimately it's Arsenal and Sporting CP and Bayern Munich and Real Madrid on the other side of the bracket. I'm pretty sure, or actually I think it might have been 1-1 on one side in terms of the bracket, because I'm pretty sure Atletico is on the same side as Arsenal. So we'll see what happens with that. We might talk about that in the miscellaneous stuff. But obviously, looking ahead to Sunday for the Merseyside Derby against Everton away from home. It's a very important game for us to get some points for, because it really does matter in a lot of instances. But we'll see what happens. It is something that we need to work on. Actually, it's Sunday night. Actually, it's not Sunday morning. It's 11 o'clock p.m. on Sunday. So it's a big game on Monday. So we'll talk about that when we can talk about that. But yeah, it's going to be big Merseyside derby. Obviously, 2 teams that are in the top 10. Obviously, Everton being outside, being in 8th, I believe, off memory. But obviously, going to be a big game for both clubs, and both teams looking to get more points on the board for European qualification. And honestly, this season, in terms of Liverpool's season this year, has not been ideal. Obviously, no trophies this year at all. Obviously, we got bundled out in the FA Cup not long ago. Obviously, we just got bundled out in the Champions League. We're not going to win the Premier League because obviously we're too far behind. And obviously, we got beaten in the Carabao Cup as well. So that doesn't help. But hopefully, we can finish strong. Obviously, we only have to focus on the Premier League now in terms of competitions. So we can fully focus on that. Obviously, injuries to key players has happened at the wrong time a lot this season. And I wouldn't say 100% that it's a season to forget, because we've been at least competitive in some games. Obviously, we've been counted out a lot in some of the games as well, and then we've just come back strong. But it's kind of a season that's in the middle for Liverpool. But hopefully we can finish strong and get some spots in the top 4, especially because we've got prime opportunity. Obviously, Man United going down and Aston Villa getting a draw in their previous games. Obviously, we got the win, so we're only a win behind. Win and we're in the top 4. So if other results do go our way, obviously, but obviously we're putting pressure on that 3rd and 4th spot, and obviously, of course, the main talking point obviously will be all week especially after Arsenal's game, obviously against Sporting CP tomorrow morning, will be Arsenal versus Man City in the Premier League. So obviously there'll be the fight for the title basically at that point in time. So we'll see what happens. But yeah, 2-0 loss obviously to Liverpool. For Liverpool to PSG. 4-0 on aggregate. And we bundle out in the quarterfinals of the Champions League. Alright, Sunday morning. Could have recorded this yesterday, this part, but didn't do that. So we're going to talk about the Giants. Obviously, they played on Friday night, and it's a double header. Basically, they had another game going on at the same time, which was Geelong and the Western Bulldogs. Set about half an hour, 45 minutes before this game started, which is really weird in terms of scheduling for the AFL. But you know what else? What else is new? Sometimes they do that, but obviously it was Battle of the Bridge, Sydney Swans against the Giants, and it was the Swans that won by 41 points at the end of it, 107 to 66, 17 goals 5 to 8 goals and 18 behinds for the Giants. So very inaccurate in terms of in front of goal, and realistically they actually played relatively well, kept with them a decent amount, and got back within, I think it was 19 points, I think, at half time. But yeah, just in the end, Sydney were just too good, and inaccuracy in front of goal did hamper the Giants a lot. Because obviously, 26 scoring shots to 7 to 22. 26 to 22, and they lose by 41 points. So it ended up being 4 goals 1 to the Swans in the first quarter, 2 goals 5 to the Giants. So not a great start off. Then it was 1 goal 3 for the Giants, whereas it was 3 goals and 2 behinds for the Swans at half time. Then they exploded to 10 goals 3, so it was 3 goals in the third quarter compared to 2 goals and 8 behinds in the third quarter for the Giants. So again, another inaccurate quarter, and I'd say like some of those obviously rush behinds and that I kind of is fair enough, but scoring, I think a lot of players, I'll look at like the player stats in a second, but a lot of players had set shots and missed a lot of those goals. So it's not great. And then obviously in the last quarter, the Giants ended up scoring 3 goals 2 compared to 7 goals and 2 behinds in the last for the Swans. So not ideal there. In terms of goals, for the Giants, Jake Riccardi, he was a late in. Callum Brown was a late in for Jesse Hogan being out. He had a quad problem just before the game. And this game went on for a while because there was a lightning delay between halftime and the start of the second half. So they had to wait like at least 45 minutes, I think, after halftime to get the game started again. But for the Giants, obviously Jake Riccardi had to step up with Aaron Cadman being out. He scored 3, so he did relatively well. Phoenix Goddard got 2. Lee Collier got 1. That was decently in the third quarter, I believe, if not the fourth quarter, to kind of give momentum back to the Giants to try and cause an upset, but obviously didn't happen. Toby Bedford scored 1, and Finn Callahan also scored 1 for the Giants. But it's one of those games that you kind of want to forget for the Giants. But if they weren't as inaccurate on the scoreboard as they were, I reckon they would have played relatively well. But again, in saying that, what else can we do? Obviously, we've got injuries. Obviously 2 of our forwards were out in terms of Cadman, and obviously Jesse Hogan being a late out I know we can't blame injuries a lot, and I'm not actually blaming it all on that. Some of that obviously is on the injuries, but obviously losing by 41 and kicking 18 behinds in terms of 26 scoring shots is not good enough either. I'm not making the excuse that it's only just the injuries is the reason why we lost this game, because the inaccuracy in front of goal is also another issue that was entirely on us. And if you convert a lot more of those to goals, this result actually ends up being a lot closer. I think, like I said, it was like 19 points at half time. I think it got down to as low as 13 late in the third quarter, if not in the fourth, before obviously the Swans exploded at the end of the game with a few goals in a row. But yeah, it's one of those things. Obviously, next week, on Sunday, actually today, next week, we play North Melbourne in Canberra. And again, they're in 8th position right now. Obviously, I think they've still got to play a game yet. So it's going to be very interesting the next couple of weeks, because we got them. And then obviously, we've got the Gold Coast in the Gold Coast and the Expansion Cup as well, before we head back home to play against Essendon. So it's one of those things that's going to be very, very tough. Because North Melbourne, they're not like how they have been the last few seasons when they've been up and down and all over the place. They've been up, mostly up this season. So they've played good football, even in losses. They've played relatively good football. Obviously, the one against Brisbane in Gabba round last week is testament to that, because they kept with Brisbane for a lot of that game. Brisbane didn't play their absolute best game, but ultimately North Melbourne are leaps and bounds in front of where they have been. And at the moment, the Giants are now sitting in 14th with 8 points to their name, under St Kilda, in front of West Coast, Carlton, Essendon and Richmond. But it's behind St Kilda and Port Adelaide on 8 points. But, bit hard, but losing 41 points to the Swans in Sydney Derby 32, Battle of the Bridge 32. Lot to be desired there for the Giants. Now, next I would technically go to the Titans, but I'm just going to tear the Band-Aid off, go to the A-League, go to the Wanderers. They lost again. I mean, that's not really a surprise. It's another week and another Wanderers loss, so what a surprise there is there. It was 2-1 loss to Wellington Phoenix, which means, yes, the Wanderers have gotten the double in both the men's and women's competitions. They're getting the wooden spoon, because now the lead is unassailable against both Brisbane and Perth Glory. So Eze scored in the 16th minute. Then Brandon Borrello got one in the 41st minute, so it was 1-1 at half time, looking like it was going to be a draw. And then Nakazawa scored in the 56th minute. Again, Wanderers being Wanderers this season, or 2025-26 Wanderers being 2025-26 Wanderers. Again, lead the possession game 55 to 45%, 18 shots on goal to 10 in the favour of the Phoenix. 7 shots on target for the Wanderers compared to 6 for the Phoenix, which made their shot accuracy a lot better for the Wanderers, with 70% compared to 33%. And again, in saying that, the Phoenix got on the score sheet twice, so it's like, well, okay, they might have shot wayward at goal, but they got the 2 shots on target that they wanted. Again, not really a surprise. That means that the Wanderers are on the bottom, still on 21 points, and it's 5 points the difference at the moment between them and Brisbane. Obviously, Brisbane did lose very close to Melbourne City. They had to fight back towards the end of the game. And Perth Glory ended up picking up a draw with Sydney FC, so that means Sydney FC are a little bit susceptible to dropping even right out of their top 4 finish right now, because they're on 38 points, the same amount of points as Melbourne City, but Adelaide United has still got to play. and they're 1 point behind them, and also Victory is also 1 point behind Sydney FC and Melbourne City at this point. Now, obviously, with that, in saying that, with Victory, they did draw 2-2 to the Jets, so the Jets still got points on the board. Auckland have still got to play Central Coast Mariners today, and Adelaide have got to play Macarthur. But the top 6 is cemented, obviously, with that win for Melbourne City. So in the finals, it'll be Newcastle Jets, Auckland FC, Sydney FC, Melbourne City, Victory, and Adelaide United, because the points between Adelaide and Wellington at the moment is 4 points, and there's only one game left of the season. They can't make it, but obviously the Phoenix did relatively well, kept with it. Obviously, if they did win last week and didn't lose last week, they would be right in the hunt right now, because Victory obviously would have only been 1 point in front of them. But obviously with that loss, it kind of helps Victory in a lot of instances. Obviously with the Wanderers, if you remember correctly, yes, they play Victory in the last round. So Victory almost have a situation where they can get points. They're probably hoping that Sydney FC do lose to Auckland FC next week. And Melbourne City also lose in front of them as well. And City play Adelaide United. So actually that game actually will be very interesting between the two of them, because Adelaide, yes, they've still got a game in hand at the moment, obviously, with the game against Macarthur. But if they do get those points, Adelaide will jump to third position on the ladder right now. And 2 points in front of Sydney FC and Melbourne City. And it'll just be fighting for a spot for a home elimination final at this point in time. And even then, if Auckland do drop points, Sydney FC and Adelaide United could jump into that semi-final spot, because, I know that obviously Auckland has still got to play a game today. The gap is 4 points between them and Newcastle right now. Obviously, with a win, that'll only make it 1 point being the difference. But a lot can change in a week. But we'll talk about the table, obviously, in the miscellaneous stuff. But yeah, 2-1 loss to the Phoenix for the Wanderers, giving them the wooden spoon in both the men's and the women's competition. And I will say the effort was a lot better from the women than it was with the men this season. And yeah, thankfully at least we've only got 1 week to go of this horror show of a season, because thank God it's almost over, because it's been very, very disappointing to say the least. Could go on a rant about it, but I'm not going to waste my breath, because, they don't put the effort in, so I'm not going to put the effort in terms of ranting at them, because they know it, they should know it. If they don't, well then get out of the club. That's as simple as what I'm going to say. Just get out of the club. If you don't have any sort of luster for this club, any sort of love for this club, just go. And we just need a rebuild, like a real rebuild, because holy shit, there's been like a decade of this like coming, and it's just finally hit rock bottom. We've been close a couple of times in previous seasons, but we've had the season to forget this year after promising so much, especially after scoring as many goals as we did last year and doing relatively well. To lose, obviously in an elimination final the way that we did, and yeah, the effort has just not been shown by the majority of the players. Not everybody, and I can't, again, 100% blame Gary Van Egmond for this as well, because, he's been appointed to the job halfway through their season, basically, if not towards the end of their season, and he's done the best that he could with the side. But besides not putting up the effort, what else can he do? But yeah, it's basically a lost cause at this point. If you don't care about the club, get the fuck out. Get the fuck out of this club, because we need a whole lot better from a lot better players. But yeah, 2-1 loss to the Wanderers against Wellington Phoenix rather. It doesn't even matter who they're playing at this point. They'll probably lose. As I said a few weeks ago, they'll probably lose the rest of the games that they played. They've got one game left, and they've lost pretty much all of them since I said that. So we'll see how we go against Victory. But it's probably going to be another loss because it's the Wanderers of 2025-26. Alright, just after midday, obviously WrestleMania is going on this weekend, so that's one reason why I'm recording this after midday, because I was watching that. Obviously it started at 8 a.m. I should say, my time, so 4 hours, just about. Obviously, be 2 nights, 2-night event for WrestleMania, so we'll be watching that tomorrow as well, but I'll be talking about obviously Liverpool tomorrow, and obviously some miscellaneous stuff as well tomorrow. But it was the Titans going up against the Warriors in New Zealand. Obviously the first of the 2 matches between them. Obviously we'll play them later on in the year back in the Gold Coast. I believe that's probably in July or August. I think it's towards the end of the season, so I think it's somewhere in July if memory serves me right, in terms of looking. Big game obviously for both clubs, obviously coming off wins, both clubs coming off wins. One on Saturday, one on Sunday. Obviously, Warriors beating the Storm for the first time in a long time, especially in Melbourne. I think it's been 11 years or something like that since they last won against the Storm. And then obviously the Titans coming off a big win and their second biggest win ever as a franchise against the Eels away from home. So obviously big trip for the Titans to go, and it was a 28-20 point loss to the Titans against the Warriors, but in keeping in mind of that, it was 22-0 to the Warriors at half time. So the Titans coming back in a flurry, 20 points to 6 in the second half, but they didn't play too badly. I feel like the first half kind of let them down a lot. Obviously they did. I think they dropped the ball a decent amount in that early going of the game. So Lofi ended up actually scoring a double. The first one obviously scored very early in the 5th minute, and the second one scored late in the 22nd minute. So he ended up getting a double, converted by Tanner Void. Then Harris DeVita went over halfway through the 29th minute, was also converted. Then Dylan Weteni-Selesniak scored very late in the 34th minute to make it 20-0. And then obviously there was a penalty kick conversion, I should say, by Tanner Boyd near the post somewhere that made it 22 at halftime. Then it was a bit of a lull in between halftime and the start of the second half and the next try, because it was very early in the 50th minute. Jojo Fafita scored. Then kind of flipping the momentum, Aaron Clark ended up scoring halfway through the 52nd minute. So the momentum went back to the Warriors after that. And talking about that, when it comes to players, obviously Lofi was a player for the Titans and ended up getting a double as a Warrior against the Titans. Obviously Aaron Clark, this is not the first time obviously he has scored against the Titans, but obviously it's one of his first games against the Titans. I think it might be game 3 or 4 against the Titans since he joined the Warriors. So he ended up scoring and that try got converted to 28 points to 4 very early in the 54th minute. Then in the 69th minute, Fiamini scored a try. Obviously conversion was missed. Arama Howe scored very late in the 72nd minute. That try was converted. And then Curtis Moran ended up scoring very early in the 78th minute, which was converted as well to make the final score 28 points to 20. So there's a bit of a flurry. It didn't do too badly. I think ultimately with the fact that the first half was probably very bad for the Titans, obviously in terms of holding the ball and trying to keep possession. But the second half definitely was a lot better. And I feel like if they did have a situation where the Warriors didn't score as many points in the first half and maybe scored some of them themselves, this game would have been right up there. And I feel like I'm not too hurt by the loss. It is a loss, yes, but it could have been a situation where obviously the Warriors are in the top four right now. And obviously this game going into this was always going to be one of those tests to see how good this Titans team is, especially after obviously the big win last week against the Eels, to see where they're at. Because obviously they've had some, we've had some really bad losses in terms of obviously the big loss in week one, obviously to the Sharks. And the Sharks have, been up and down all over the place in terms of results since that game. Then we have a situation, obviously, where we kind of bottled it. And I shouldn't say we kind of bottled it. We did bottle it against the Dolphins, which we should have won that game in particular. So that was in there. And then we got relatively... Well, I don't say we didn't get massively humbled by the Broncos, but we kept in it for quite some time. And obviously that was a test to see on how well both teams obviously play against each other. And usually they play relatively well in terms of rivalry games like that. And then obviously the big loss against the Cowboys. So we kind of wanted to see where the benchmark was, because the Warriors are going to be in the 8 and relatively fighting around the top 4, I think, unless injuries really hit them, because they're playing really good football. They've been playing some really, really fabulous football, and they're definitely going to be fighting for that top 4, if not in that top 8. Obviously, injuries can play a part in that, but in fact, they've played relatively well so far this season already. The Warriors, so hats off to them, because obviously they got the win. They did what they needed to do. Having a couple of tries very late in the game, getting scored against them to make that result a little bit closer is probably not ideal for them. That's something that they can work on. But for the Titans, I think they can take a lot out of this game and saying, especially in that second half, running alongside the Warriors and keeping up with their momentum and putting pressure on them. And they kind of folded a little bit, especially late in that second half. So I feel like there's a lot to take out of this game, despite it, yes, being a loss. I think it's one of those, building, team building losses in that, it was 8 points was the difference between the Titans and the Warriors. And the fact is, missed a couple of conversions as well. It would have been a hell of a lot closer as well if some of those conversions did get made. As well as obviously the Warriors did have a few conversions missed as well. But in saying that, it wasn't too bad. Obviously one try. No. So all the conversions, except for one, was converted by the Warriors. In terms of the Titans, they've missed one. They missed two. So they missed two. So there would have been 4 points the difference between the two teams, counting obviously the first conversion going wide and the missing for the Warriors. But it still would have been 4 to 6 points if all the conversions were all kicked from all teams. So it's still relatively close. And I feel like I am proud of that in the fact that they gave them a fight. They usually do when it comes to the Warriors, because obviously, apart from obviously the 66-6 win that they had against the Warriors, obviously in the Gold Coast, the Titans, they've had some nick over the Warriors, and the Warriors have obviously won the majority of their fixtures between the two teams, but they do all right. They do all right against the Warriors. They somehow show up against the Warriors and really take it to them. So I hope that this is a loss that has a situation of building this team up in terms of defense and in terms of offense as well. Because if we can do that, that'll be great. Like, we'll get into a situation where we'll win a lot more games this season than we did last season, obviously. And we've almost done that. I think we've almost done that completely this season already. I think we've won at least 2 games. I think we only won 3 or 4 last year. maybe 5 if we were lucky. But yeah, we didn't do too badly. Possession was in our favour, 51% to 49%. Completion rate probably did hurt us a little bit. 87% to the Warriors, 72% to the Titans. So 15% difference between the two teams there, which isn't great. 7 line breaks to 6 in the favour of the Warriors. So that's actually pretty even in terms of that. Lots of offloads for the Titans, 19 compared to 8 in terms of that stat. Kick defusal wasn't great for the Warriors. It was 36% compared to 70% for the Titans. Effective tackles percentage is very close to both of them. 44 missed tackles in favour of the Titans to 25 for the Warriors. 13 errors to 6 in terms of the Titans in the lead in that. Penalties conceded was 4 to 3 in the favour of the Warriors. I think so. That means they conceded 1 more penalty during the game. 7 ruck infringements to 3 in terms of 6 agains to the Warriors. 1 being inside 10 metres for the Titans. Yeah, it was pretty close. I think ultimately this is a game that we can look back on, and if we win quite a few games this season, especially with some of the games coming up in the next couple of weeks, we can say that game, we can point to that game was the one. That game was the one that turned everything around. So we do have a gap between our next match because we don't play until the 2nd of May. So we have the bye next week, so we will get 2 points, 2 competition points next week from that. But we're sitting right now with a couple of results still to go in 15th. So we did drop a spot from 14th to 15th, but it's only because the Raiders ended up winning against the Storm on Friday night. So they actually jumped both the Titans and the Storm in that list. So that means, yes, the Storm, and I can show you this, the Storm are in the bottom 4 right now. In terms of Sunday afternoon, they're in the bottom 4, which is unheard of. Usually, they haven't had this bad of a start since, I think, 2012. And ultimately, the stat says that. And the last time they went like that was 2012, and they won the competition that year. So we'll see what happens. But they've had 50 conceded this year by obviously playing against Penrith. They conceded 50 total points. So if there's any team that's going to break the streak in terms of conceding 50 and winning it, it'll be the Storm out of the list of them. But yeah, the Dragons still are on the bottom. The Eels are still going to play today. They're going to play against the Bulldogs in a big game for them. But right now, obviously, the Titans are sitting in 15th with minus 30 in terms of their for and against, which is not too bad in terms of that. But obviously, we will jump to 6 points next week. And possibly could jump to maybe 13th, if not 12th, if the Dolphins do get belted by the Warriors next week. So we'll see what happens with that. And obviously, we're beating the Raiders, obviously, on for and against right now. So we'll jump them because they play the Tigers. So that could be a situation where obviously the Tigers just lost very close to the Brisbane Broncos. And they'll probably look to reverse that and put the momentum back in their sails because they're up in top 4. Obviously, they dropped to 3rd right now in terms of the table. But we'll see what happens. There's a lot of the season left to go. But yeah, we have the bye next week in terms of the Titans. And their next game is at home, obviously against the Canberra Raiders on the 2nd of May. But 28 points to 20 against the Warriors. Another loss, yes, for the Titans. But I think this one, more so than a lot of other losses, I feel like this could be a team-building one. And if it is used effectively this season, a lot of things can turn around for this club. And I feel like that is something that this club needs. So if we can get that into a situation of giving momentum back to this team and winning against the Raiders, possibly winning against the Roosters in the week after that, maybe playing well against the Knights, obviously going into that Sea Eagles game, right around my birthday. Obviously, those two, the Knights game and the Sea Eagles game, right around my birthday. My birthday is like smack right in the middle. Obviously, the 17th of May, obviously, against the Knights, and the 23rd of May against the Sea Eagles. Whereas my birthday, obviously, is in the 20th, so it's right in the middle before heading into the next bye, which obviously will be around Origin time, that round 13 bye. So this next 4-week block of games after this bye coming up this week, it's going to be very important to see where our season goes. But 28 points to 20, the Warriors over the Titans. But, it is a loss, but I will say it was a pretty hearty loss in terms of that for this Titans team. Alright, going to try this again because I had the dogs barking in the backyard on that side. But it feels weird that I'm recording this on Monday afternoon. Usually I have this done and recorded by this time of the day, and actually editing usually at this point in time in the afternoon if I'm editing it on a Monday. But we're going to talk about Liverpool. Obviously, they played last night. They played late last night. I was up for the first half of this. Did crash to sleep, I think, during the second half, so I didn't actually see what the result was after half time really well. But Liverpool, obviously, Merseyside Derby against Everton. Big event, especially considering this is the first game at Hill Dickinson Stadium, obviously Everton's new stadium, obviously Goodison Park. We played it last year. Obviously, it was the last time that the Everton men's team was playing there. The women's team, I believe, play there now, so that's good for use for that particular park. At least they're using it for the club and they're using it in some capacity, rather than letting it rot and sit there, not actually being used. I appreciated the fact that they're actually using it for something in particular, and obviously new big ground, obviously first Merseyside Derby on Everton's side of the Merseyside. So big event, obviously two teams in the top 10, obviously Liverpool and Everton both fighting for European football for next season. And it was a 2-1 win for Liverpool over Everton in the Merseyside Derby, the last of the year this season. It was great result. In fact, it was 1-0 at halftime to Liverpool, though it almost actually swung the other way because initially Everton actually did score in the 28th minute, but VAR overturned it to be no goal. I believe it was offside in terms of the person that provided the assist, so that didn't help in that regard for them. And not only that, a minute later, Mo Salah gets a pass. Obviously, there's a few players that have been under pressure all game, and gets a pass, slots one in, top corner, and scores in his last Merseyside derby for Liverpool, obviously, because he's leaving at the end of this season to Liverpool. Everton struck back in the 54th minute, and obviously there was a lot of discourse in between that. Obviously, it was a Merseyside derby. As much as it is, it's a derby game. Obviously, rivalry is going to be first and foremost in this game. And it was in the 10th minute of stoppage time before full time rather, that we got a corner, and right off the corner in the middle of the box, Virgil van Dijk goes with the header, and it goes in the back of the net. So 10th minute stoppage time. It was a winner with Virgil van Dijk. Seen a lot of those over the years. Obviously, previously in the greater years of Liverpool, when they were winning a lot of trophies and stuff under Jurgen Klopp, especially. And obviously, he was a guy that was in there that scored a lot of goals, obviously. But it was great that we got into a situation where we've scored very late again in a game, because it's been a while since we've managed to do that. But fantastic result for Liverpool. There was a few big results. Obviously, you can talk about the table today because there's only one game that hasn't been played yet this particular match week for the Premier League, and that is West Ham against Crystal Palace. So Crystal Palace right now are in 13th position on 42 points. They could jump up to 45 points, jump Fulham to get into 12th position. But West Ham, obviously, on the brink of the relegation zone, got out last week, obviously, with Spurs losing, and West Ham winning over Wolverhampton Wolves. So they're outside by 1 point at the moment. Obviously, Spurs drew very late in their game against Brighton. They were actually ahead 2-1, and Brighton actually scored in like the last minute of the game, basically. For a draw, obviously they scored. I think they scored. Tottenham scored like in like the 70th, 80th minute. Or like even the 60th minute. So they were thinking they were going ahead by a lot, and they ended up settling for a draw. So they got a point back, but obviously West Ham has still got to play Crystal Palace. If West Ham do win, they'll move to 35 points, meaning that Tottenham will be 4 points adrift at the bottom in the relegation zone. So they'll be very much in a situation of under dire straits. I think Wolves, now are close to relegation now, like fully eliminated and going back to the Championship. We'll say Coventry City confirm their spot in the Premier League next season. They've already won enough games and got enough points to jump in automatically. They've got an automatic spot. And Cardiff City also was another one that is being promoted from League One to the Championship next year. So they dropped down last season, at the end of last season in the Championship, and then they've jumped back up in to that position. Obviously, Sheffield Wednesday, obviously with the minus points differential because they had infractions and stuff like that, and obviously it was points deduction in terms of some rules in terms of many situations with the club going against some of the rules of the EFL and stuff like that. So obviously they got a punishment of points being deducted from them. So they're being obviously relegated to League One. Leicester City are looking like they might be as well. They've only got a couple of games left, but they're a few points adrift from the bottom. In fact, actually played one of the teams that was around that relegation zone and lost to them. So they might drop even to League One, which is crazy to talk about, over a decade since they won their Premier League title, and now they're in a situation of the relegation zone in the Championship, going down to League One possibly. But obviously things are heating up in the Championship. Other results today, last night and this morning, Aston Villa won 4-3 over Sunderland. So very close encounter there against two really good sides. Nottingham Forest moved a little bit further away from the relegation zone with a 4-1 win over Burnley. So Nottingham Forest now on 36 points. So they're 5 points away from Spurs at the moment, which is great for them, and actually leading in terms of goal difference between the two clubs as well. And obviously the big result obviously was the game very early this morning, very much after Liverpool's Merseyside Derby game with Everton, was obviously Manchester City and Arsenal, obviously title clash with the top two sides. And it was Manchester City that got the win over Arsenal at the Etihad Stadium. So 2-1 win over Arsenal. Manchester City scored, then immediately after that Arsenal scored an equaliser. The goalkeeper, I believe, messed up for Manchester City, so it was tied at 1-1. And then towards the end of the second half, Manchester City scored and Arsenal could not. So with that, obviously, into consideration with the other results, obviously, Liverpool getting a win leaves Arsenal still on the top with 70 points, and they've been like that for a couple of weeks. They've only been just in front, but Manchester City are on 67 points in second, so they're 3 points behind Arsenal at this point in time. And they do have a game on Wednesday/Thursday. My time, they play against Burnley. So if they win that game, they will move to the top of the table with a win. So that is a huge, huge result for Manchester City and Arsenal at this point in time, because Arsenal has still got obviously games up their sleeve in terms of obviously the Premier League, obviously some important games coming up, trying to get as many points as possible. Obviously the title race is not over for them at this point in time, but they've also got obviously Champions League they've got to worry about as well, which is another thing that is on top of that. Obviously Manchester City also still have the FA Cup, their games for that, the semi-finals and possibly the final for that as well. Obviously it's probably just as big for Manchester City in terms of extra games as it is for Arsenal with the Champions League games. Obviously Champions League double leg semi-final. Though obviously with Manchester City, I think with the semi-final of the FA Cup, it might be one leg, not two legs, but I'm not 100% sure. I forget sometimes. There's so many competitions to wrap your head around, and some of the ways that they do some of the qualifications for some competitions and not others, is that it's, you do two legs in some of them, and it's a one and done in others. So still extra games obviously for Manchester City and Arsenal at this point, but Arsenal have got a lot of things to worry about. They're going to really, really try and win as many games as possible, because they're going to try and fight off Manchester City behind them, because another slip up and they are right in the mix. Obviously Manchester City, it's the title is kind of in their hands right now. It's kind of in the hands of Manchester City, if with that extra game in hand right now. So it makes it very important, obviously, this game against Burnley for Manchester City, obviously, but obviously the rest of the season with Arsenal and Manchester City, if any of them let up with points, could give the title to the other team at this point in time. Third position is Manchester United on 58 points. They won against Chelsea a couple of days ago, so they've kept their spot in the top four. On the same amount of points, just behind them on goal difference, is Aston Villa on 58 points. Obviously, as I said, they won against Sunderland in a very, very enticing game. In fact, obviously, with the fact that Sunderland were in the top 10, they're not currently at the moment, but Sunderland, obviously coming from the Championship last year, doing very well, obviously against Aston Villa, losing by one goal, yes, but in a situation, obviously, Aston Villa being a team that's in the top four, that's obviously in the Europa League right now as well, playing European football as well as Premier League football. A one goal difference between the two clubs in a game this late in the season is very good from them. Obviously, fifth position is Liverpool on 55 points, so 3 points behind both Aston Villa and Man United. Though I will say the goal difference is better for Liverpool than it is for Aston Villa, and it's just behind Man United right now. They're on plus 11. Aston Villa is on plus 6, and Man United on plus 13 for the season so far. So very interesting situation, especially if Aston Villa drop 3 points and Liverpool get those 3 points. It'll kind of swing the top four in a very massive way. Sixth position, obviously, with that loss is Chelsea on 48 points, so that pushes them 7 points adrift of fifth position with Liverpool. Not a great result for them. They keep slipping. Have lost quite a few games on the trot. Obviously, the only win that they've had in the last 6 or 7 games is obviously against Port Vale in the FA Cup quarterfinals. So they're through, obviously, to the semi-finals of the FA Cup, but lots of things to worry about for them. Seventh position, also on 48 points. Behind them on goal difference is Brentford. They played relatively well. I forget if they got a draw or they got a win in their last fixture. In fact, I can even look at the table. I don't even know why I'm saying that. If it'll load for me. I thought I pressed the button. I did not. They drew. They've actually drawn the last 5 games, actually, Brentford. So they've actually gotten points from the last 5 games, which for them is really, really good in that situation, because you keep getting points, you're going to get into a situation where you're going to jump up the table a little bit, especially in that middle area between 6th and 14th right now, with obviously 14th being 42 points, and obviously Brentford being at 48 points in 7th position, and obviously Chelsea on the same amount in 6th. Then also on 48 points in 8th position is Bournemouth. Obviously they won last game, so they jump up into 8th. Brighton stays in 9th with 47 points. Obviously they drew to Tottenham, as we mentioned. Everton dropped to 10th, obviously with that loss, on 47 points as well. 11th position is Sunderland with 46 points, obviously in a very close loss to Aston Villa. Crystal Palace have still got to play a game yet, so they're on 42 points right now. They can jump Fulham into 12th position, as I mentioned earlier, with 45. If not, obviously, they will move to 43 points with a draw and stay on 42 points with a loss. 14th position behind Crystal Palace is Newcastle. They lost their last game. They're also on 42 points. 39 points behind them in 15th is Leeds United. They end up getting a win themselves, so they are edging away from their relegation zone. They're 8 points in front of Tottenham at the moment. So they're pretty much, you'd think, almost to be out of range to get out of the relegation race completely, and is safe at the end of this season. Obviously Nottingham Forest in 16th position with 36 points, 5 points in front of Tottenham. So not completely safe as of yet, but still around the mix. Obviously West Ham still got that game in hand against Crystal Palace. They're on 32 points. They could obviously jump to 35 with a win, obviously 33 with a draw, and obviously stay on 32 with a loss. But obviously they will put more pressure on Tottenham to perform as well, because they're in the relegation zone still, with 31 points in 18th position. 19th position is Burnley. They lost, obviously. They lost pretty heavily, but they have Manchester City on Wednesday/Thursday, and obviously Wolverhampton Wolves still on the bottom with 17. Though it's funny because that game is actually their next game is very enticing, because they actually play Tottenham in their next game. So it'd be very enticing to see if Wolves can somehow get off the bottom, because they're obviously 3 points behind Burnley, but still behind them by 4 goals in terms of goal difference. It's minus 33 for Burnley, minus 37 for Wolves. So it'd be interesting to see if they can pick up a win against Tottenham and see how they fare in the last couple of games of the season, to see where they're at, because obviously, the bottom is the bottom, yes, but who knows what the result's going to be and which team is actually going to be down there. Because Wolves is still not that far behind Burnley, but any points that Burnley can get from here until the end of the season is going to help them get off that bottom spot. But very enticing, even at the bottom of the ladder with the Premier League. But obviously 2-1 win in the Merseyside Derby for Liverpool over Everton, and some big results coming ahead. Obviously, and I just closed that. I just forgot that I had to talk about the next game. I've been talking more so about the league in general, about all that. Next game, obviously, for Liverpool is against Crystal Palace. It is on Sunday the 26th at midnight my time. So it's right at the ticking point over on the weekend. So we'll not be watching that, but I will obviously be trying to keep up with that. But it's obviously very important us to strive for more points. Obviously, Crystal Palace have had the nick over us in the last few fixtures that we've had against them. Obviously in the Premier League, obviously in the FA Cup, obviously in the FA Cup Community Shield. They won that. There's quite a few fixtures that we went against Crystal Palace and have not won against them. But obviously getting points from them is going to help, because obviously our next month is going to be very important. Obviously going into May, it's Man United, it's Chelsea, then Aston Villa, and then Brentford to finish off the season. So very, very important games. All four of those games are very important. And obviously this match against Crystal Palace is also very important as well. One, to obviously kind of get the monkey off the back in terms of trying to get some results against Crystal Palace again, but obviously trying to put more pressure on Aston Villa and Man United, because if we can keep in that 3-point zone between both teams, obviously the next games after Crystal Palace is against Man United, and obviously in a couple of weeks after that it's Aston Villa. Between that obviously is Chelsea, so it's very important to obviously try and get a win against Crystal Palace, lead that momentum into playing against Man United, which is obviously going to be a top four, it's going to be a top 5, top 4 clash at this point in time. And obviously will be a fight for the top 4, because if Man United can win, you most likely will think that they will finish third. But obviously if they lose against Liverpool, it's going to be very, very interesting to see where Man United will end up if they stay in the top 4, because obviously if Aston Villa win, they're on the same amount of points as well, and obviously Liverpool jumping in, it's going to make things a little bit messy in terms of that 3, 4 and 5 position for them, and even obviously 6th position obviously with Chelsea, but Chelsea are going to win some more games, being a few points adrift of Liverpool, but 2 goals to 1 win over Everton, the Merseyside Derby for Liverpool. Great result for them, especially at Everton's new home ground. Alright, now we'll go over some miscellaneous stuff. I apologise for obviously, I guess, ranting about the Premier League, but obviously very excited with the last few weeks of the Premier League season coming on, and obviously the title race heating up with Arsenal and Manchester City. Obviously Liverpool being in a situation of playing European football and getting closer and closer to getting that. Obviously, I think they've got 5 positions in the top, the top 5, I think, from Premier League are actually going to go through to the Champions League this season. So any points that Liverpool can get on the board would be great. Obviously, top 4 finish would be great for that. And obviously even heating up in the middle of the table, and obviously the relegation zone, always exciting in terms of that, to see which teams will move up and which teams will move down. Obviously, we'll talk about, talked about Coventry, City moving up, and we're looking like probably the first team probably will be out is Wolverhampton at this point, but obviously they still could be off the bottom of the Premier League table, despite not winning a lot of their games at the start of the season and not winning for quite some time. In fact, actually probably almost half of the season going through. We'll talk about obviously some other tables, because obviously some other games are done. The Giants, obviously with their loss in the Sydney Derby, Battle of the Bridge, they dropped to 14th still. They still stay in that position. Obviously West Coast lost in the Western Derby against Fremantle. They didn't get belted, but they did lose by 20, 30, 40 points or so. Melbourne, the Demons obviously won against Brisbane, so they actually jumped down from 9th to 8th position, dropping Brisbane to 9th position. Adelaide won by a point. There's quite a few results. Obviously, North Melbourne got a big win against Richmond, so Richmond's still on the bottom, and North Melbourne jump into 5th position. Obviously, we play North Melbourne on the weekends. We play them on Sunday the 26th, so that's going to be a very important game in Canberra for both teams. Obviously, very, very important, obviously, for the Giants to pick up a win there, going into, obviously, some big fixtures coming after that. Obviously, the Sydney Derby, obviously, big game against North Melbourne. Obviously, North Melbourne being a little bit different from the North Melbourne that we've played against in recent seasons. Not that they've been far away, but obviously the results have not gone their way in the last few seasons. Obviously, this year, a lot of them are going a lot better, and even the losses in terms of that, some of them are their mistakes, but obviously if they can fix up those mistakes, you look at some team that is possibly losing, but only losing very close to a lot of good teams, obviously Brisbane being one of them, but obviously some really, really good competition. And then obviously going to the Gold Coast to play the Suns in the Expansion Cup on the 3rd of May. So leading into that game from the North Melbourne game, obviously very important before coming home against Essendon. So very important there, but obviously 14th position, just outside the bottom 4. for the Giants. Obviously, not the most ideal situation we want to be in, but that's where we are right now. Obviously, some other results went completely crazy at the end of last week. Obviously, we talk about the Titans. Eels won 38 points to 20 over the Bulldogs. The Roosters won 38-24 over the Newcastle Knights. So the ladder has changed a little bit. Yes, Gold Coast do drop to 16th position, but obviously with Para and the Raiders both getting wins, they jump up in front of the Gold Coast Titans and the Melbourne Storm. Melbourne Storm in 15th, so they're third from last. Also, St George, they just sacked their coach today and their head of football as well. I think there's supposed to be an announcement on the news at 5:30, I think, when I'm recording this. So this is like 4 or 5 hours from now and what's going to happen. Don't know who the interim coach is going to be, but they're probably going to announce that with that announcement, with that coverage on the news. So we don't know. Yes, the Gold Coast do drop to 16th, but with minus 30 as their for and against going into the bye, obviously they'll jump a couple of positions. Ultimately, you're looking at, unless the Raiders win heavily against the Tigers, and especially if the Eels can do it against the Sea Eagles, which I doubt, they're going to jump. And even if, the Dolphins don't do that great, obviously they're in front minus 27 right now, but they play the Warriors as well. So it could be a situation where the Gold Coast could jump from 16th, obviously with the bye this week. With for and against, they might even jump into 12th position right now going into this week. So that's going to be very, very important for them going into, obviously, the next game for them, which round 9, obviously against the Raiders as well. So it's going to be at home. So it's going to be a very important couple of weeks. Obviously taking the bye, obviously getting some people rested up, see if we can get some players back for that clash against the Raiders in the Gold Coast. But obviously, yes, Gold Coast right now dropping to 16th position, but obviously have the bye this week. So they have a rest going into, obviously, this week, and then going into the game against the Raiders, which I believe is on Saturday, early Saturday game on the 2nd of May. So that's going to be very important. In fact, actually, I will be going to the late game of that day. Roosters against the Broncos. Just got my confirmation that my accommodation is booked up for that. So we will be going to that game to watch. Obviously, my dad's friend and my dad and myself are all going down there to stay overnight in Sydney to watch that game. Obviously, my dad's friend is a big Brisbane supporter, Broncos supporter, and obviously my dad is a Roosters supporter. So we're like, oh yeah, we'll go watch the game. Obviously, I haven't seen my dad's friend for a while. Obviously, I've worked with him where I work, where I used to work. So he knows me very well. In terms of, obviously, the A-League, there was a lot of movement around. Very important games, obviously, that went down yesterday in the last round, which actually cemented a lot of things. It was a 1-0 loss to the Mariners for Auckland FC, which means that the Premier's Plate goes to Newcastle and the Newcastle Jets. First silverware in a long, long time in the A-League for Newcastle. First Premier's Plate for them. And obviously the Mariners, their deepest rivals of the F3 Derby, obviously helped them with that. And it was a 3-1 win for Adelaide United over Macarthur Bulls. So obviously the top 6 with obviously Melbourne City, as I said, in the Wanderers part of the video. Top 6 is confirmed. So the rest of the teams, obviously Wellington, Mariners, Macarthur Bulls, Perth Glory, Brisbane Roar, and the Wanderers obviously are all out of competition. Obviously the Wanderers have the wooden spoon. That is confirmed at this point. But that means that Newcastle cannot be moved off top spot with 45 points. 4 points between them and second, obviously, is Auckland FC and Auckland FC play against Sydney FC, which is obviously a big clash for both clubs because obviously Auckland FC 1 point in front of Adelaide United right now and are 3 points in front of Sydney FC on the table. And obviously for that top two clash, top two will go to the semi-finals immediately. In terms of the final series, obviously it's a top six system. So for that, Newcastle have already cemented their spot to go straight to the semis. But obviously between those three clubs, and even looking at Melbourne City as well, they could almost edge their way in, but they would need that Sydney FC and Auckland to kind of draw. And even then, they want Auckland to lose, but they won't make a top two spot. It's Sydney FC and Auckland, or Adelaide United might sneak in as well, considering how close they are to Auckland. So it's Auckland in second and 41 points. Adelaide United, obviously with that win, moves to 40 points in third position, so 1 point behind Auckland FC. So a draw for Auckland FC against Sydney FC, and a win with Adelaide, who play, let me have a look, against Melbourne City, will confirm a top two spot for Adelaide if Auckland do get the draw. Obviously, with that, if Sydney FC win, they'll obviously move to 41 points. They'll be on the same points as Auckland, but it also could be a situation where Adelaide, obviously playing in Amy Park in the last game of the season, could jump into that top two spot. So obviously they'll want Auckland to lose to get through to the semi-finals for the A-League finals in the men's competition. Obviously, like I said, fourth position is Sydney FC with 38 points. Also on 38 points is Melbourne City. So obviously in terms of 3, 4, 5, and Melbourne Victory in sixth with 37 points. All four of those clubs, obviously, at the moment, if the season finished as it is, will be in elimination finals. It'll just be now fighting for who gets the right to host those finals. So in terms of what results happen this week, obviously, Auckland being in second against Sydney FC in fourth position, very big game. Adelaide United, obviously, very important game for them against Manchester City. Sorry, I've done it again. I seem to do that a lot in this series. Melbourne City, so third versus fifth, and obviously Victory is up against the Wanderers. So in terms of obviously positioning, a lot of those teams will be fighting for home finals in terms of elimination, especially in Victory's case, because obviously they can't jump into the top two, and neither can Melbourne City at this point in time. It's really a three-horse race to that semi-final spot, that last semi-final spot, automatic semi-final spot for second position at the end of this season. But obviously, Newcastle winning their first Premier's Plate, fantastic result for them. Obviously winning the the Australian Cup rather, earlier this season, and getting some silverware in the first season under Mark Milligan, which is fantastic for them. Great results for them. We'll talk about the Cubs as well. Obviously, I keep going on very long, and I apologise for that, but obviously there's a lot of exciting things to talk about when it comes to a lot of these games. But we'll talk about, obviously, the week that was. Press this one. If I look at the schedule, obviously in the last week, obviously we played against Pittsburgh, and we almost got swept. We did win the last game of the three, obviously losing 2-0 in the first one, 4-3 in the second, obviously in 11 innings, so it went to extra innings as well, and obviously a win against Pittsburgh Pirates. 7-6 in the last game, which made it 7-8. Going into Philadelphia, we lost that first game against Philadelphia, 13-7. So it actually looked like we were going to get blown out completely. But obviously got some runs in the fifth and the sixth inning, which made it look a little bit better. The eighth inning rather. It was 12 runs to 2. Before that eighth inning, so 5-run swing in the 8th inning. I was looking at the wrong name. But obviously, we're still in Philadelphia. Won the next game, 10 runs to 4, and then won 11 runs to 2. So we ended up actually scoring 28 runs to 20, I believe it was. 19 rather, I can't count today. So a lot of runs on the board in that 3-game series, obviously against Philadelphia. And then obviously just swept the Mets at home. 12 runs to 4 in the first game, 4 runs to 2 in the second game, and 2 runs to 1 in the third game. I will say that is today's game that actually they were behind in until the late in the 9th inning. Fantastic that we got a situation where Conforto obviously played for the Mets. He scored a double, and we got a score on the board. And then in the bottom of the 10th, Nico Horner once again got out on a sacrifice fly, but PCA ended up starting on base 2, obviously with it being extra innings, and scored from that second base. So ended up swinging all the way back with a walk-off for the Cubs. And now the Cubs have gone 5 games straight, won 6 of the last 7 to make their record 12-9 instead. And in fact have moved off the bottom of the ladder in terms of their division, with obviously a loss by Milwaukee against was it against Detroit? Or did they play Detroit Tigers next? I think they played Detroit Tigers next. The Brewers played, where are we? Reds won, Cardinals won, Brewers lost to the Marlins. Okay, so it actually was a decent team in that, because Miami are actually playing some good baseball right now. But there's been some really good results. Obviously, Pittsburgh also got a win as well. So obviously that makes it the Reds on top in the division, then the Cardinals, then the Pittsburgh Pirates, then the Chicago Cubs being a game and a half behind, obviously in the lead for the Central Division. And in terms of the wild card spots, they are outside. So what is it? So Pittsburgh would be in terms of the wild card. We're two teams behind them right now. So we got Padres, then the Cardinals, then Pittsburgh Pirates, and then the Diamondbacks in front of us, and then obviously Chicago in next behind Arizona. So we're 8th spot right now in terms of the wild card for the National League. So great result, obviously getting 5 wins in a row, and actually being in front of 500 for the first time this season, which is great. But it doesn't get any easier, because obviously we do play the Phillies again in the next 4 games, next 4 days as well. Obviously the day this goes up, and obviously a few days after that, play against the Phillies, but we play at home at Wrigley Field before we go away against the Dodgers and the Padres. So we won't get another break until the 12th of May. The 1st of May rather. I keep forgetting. So it's not until the 1st of May, I believe, is the next break. So we have a 4-game series against the Phillies at home at Wrigley Field, then 3 games away at Dodger Stadium, then 3 games away if it doesn't reset, 3 games away at San Diego at Petco Park before that break. So some very, very interesting opposition, obviously, to come up to next. Obviously, we just played Philadelphia, won that 3-game series, 2 games to 1, but very, very good 12 games, 12 wins, 9 losses for the season so far for the Cubs. So great results for them, winning 5 in a row. And we just want to keep that momentum going. If we lose a game here and there, is great. But obviously we want to win as many games as possible. But this next block of games is going to be very important, obviously, against the Dodgers. Dodgers are playing relatively well. as well as obviously the Padres. They're in a wildcard spot right now. Obviously, it's very early in the season still, but obviously they're playing some good baseball right now. And obviously the Phillies, we just played and we played pretty competitively against them. Obviously did trounce them on runs, but a few calls here and there, a few hits that could have went a bit awry for both teams, and the results swing completely the other direction. So great results obviously for the Cubs, winning 5 in a row, but obviously this next block of games in series at home and away is going to be very important for them to finish off April with, and then we'll see how they are. But lots of games to talk about coming up next week, obviously. Very important, obviously, for Liverpool against Crystal Palace. Obviously, the Titans have the bye, so we don't have to worry about that. Obviously, we'll talk about them the week after against the Raiders. We have the Giants, obviously, against North Melbourne. The Wanderers are done. We'll talk about them, obviously, against Victory in the last round of the A-League season after getting the wooden spoon. Lots of things to talk about. I've probably kept you too long anyway for this episode, so I'm going to finish it right now. Thank you guys so much for watching this episode of How's My Team. Very, very long episode, and I apologise for the length of some of these episodes, but just like talking sometimes about my favourite teams. This has been my Man Tells 100. You guys are great to night, and of course, take care.